Say hey guys. Hey everyone, so it's been a while since we've had a sit down video, and I'm sorry that I never got up my last pregnancy video. I was just feeling really crappy by the end of it, and I felt like I wasn't going to be pregnant for much longer, to be honest. When I got to 36 weeks, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to go to full term, because the aches and pains that I was getting them a lot earlier than I had done in previous pregnancies, so I was pretty certain he was going to be early. But I didn't expect 38 weeks. So he was born on the 25th of January, and he weighed, I think I worked it out to be 7 pound 9, which is 3.4 kilos. And I know I got it wrong in my birth video, that I said that he was 39.5 centimeters and he was actually 49.5 centimeters, but I double checked it a million times, but I still made a typo. Sorry about that. No, he's not super short. So this is going to be more like a birth story, how I got to where I am now, why everything happened the way it did, and how I was able to achieve my VBAC after 2 cesareans, which is really freaking cool if you ask me. Just bear with me because he is probably going to need a feed halfway through this. I will probably start with my prenatal care that I had with him and why it was different than what it was with all my other babies. With the twins, I had a lot of ultrasounds. I was getting them almost twice a week towards the end of it. And with my firstborn, I kind of just followed the doctor's orders and did what I had to do. This time around, I kind of felt more comfortable within myself and my choices. I didn't feel the need for lots of ultrasounds. I had one ultrasound at 8 weeks. Sorry, that's a lie. I had one ultrasound at 7 weeks, and that was to determine viability of the pregnancy. And then I had an ultrasound at 8 weeks because the first scan wasn't like super definitive. So I have a history of prior miscarriages, so we kind of wanted to rule all of that sort of stuff out. And then I didn't have another ultrasound until I was 37 weeks. I didn't have a lot of antenatal appointments either. I was measuring my fundal height at home, and I had a Doppler at home, so I was able to monitor him. Obviously I didn't know at the time, but monitor him throughout my pregnancy. When I got to my 37-week appointment, that was to book in for the hospital and all of those sorts of things. So I went down to my local hospital, and they told me that they weren't going to take me, simply because they don't take VBACs after 2 cesareans. They will take you after 1, and that's still like you kind of have to talk them into it. So, and I respect all women and their choices, so if you decide to go for another cesarean just because, then that's fine. Your body, your choice. But for me, I knew that it wasn't what I wanted, and I was so desperate to get my VBAC. So I thought to myself, well, if you're not going to take me, then I'm going to go elsewhere. So we decided to go with a hospital that is about an hour away from us. That hospital was actually the hospital that the twins were born at, and they have the best intensive care unit for neonatal in the States. So I'm super thankful that they were on standby just in case. I mean, obviously, because he was a little bit early, being 38 weeks, I mean, still not premature, but being a little bit early, and also because if anything were to happen for me or baby within labor, I knew that I was in the best place possible. So going on from that, we actually had an appointment at that hospital 10 AM on the 25th. That was to book in and just get like a feel for the labor ward and things like that, because I hadn't been in that area yet, because with the twins, they were a scheduled C-section. So I just kind of just went in and had the baby, got out. With the night before, on the 24th, about 10 p.m, I was feeling like niggles in my stomach, and I thought, okay, probably Braxton Hicks. Could just be a bug, I don't know. It didn't feel like labor, so I just decided, like, I messaged Chloe and said, just so you know, I'm having some cramping. Could be something, could not be. And she messaged me back saying, you're probably really not far off, you're probably a couple of days. And that's exactly what I was thinking, like maybe a couple of days. At that point, at about 2 a.m, I was like, no, this is something. It's progressing, it's getting worse. They're not getting closer together, but they're definitely getting more intense. So then I woke at about 5:30 with pretty intense contractions, and I said to my husband, you need to call into work because I need you to at least come to this appointment with me, which is scheduled at 10. And I said, we'll go in early, we'll go in like now-ish and have these contractions checked, but maybe I'm just in pre-labor, maybe it's just hurting a lot, I'm not entirely sure. At this point, the contractions were kind of 4 minutes apart. They weren't getting worse, so they'd intensified up until about 2 a.m, and then they just didn't really get any worse. So I thought maybe it's just pre-labor. We jump in the car, and I didn't have a baby bag packed at this point. I didn't have a labor bag packed because I thought, you know, I've still got a couple of days, I'll get that done. Yeah, no. So we just kind of grabbed everything that we knew we might need and shoved it in a bag, shoved the camera in, grabbed the camera charger, all of those sorts of things. And then we jumped in the car, and in the car on the way up to the hospital was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It's really hard being confined and pinned down under a seatbelt in peak hour traffic in the morning when everyone's trying to get to work. The kids are in the back seat going, Mom, where are we going? Where are we going? And I'm trying to explain to them, we're going to the hospital, but I'm okay. But the baby might be coming, baby might not be coming, we're not entirely sure. So they're confused, I'm in pain, and my husband's just trying to drive the car. So it was like stressful a little bit. Most of the pain was actually in the front of my stomach, down where my prior incision was. So I was actually kind of concerned about that. So that was mainly the reason why we decided to drive up to the hospital that was an hour away, as opposed to just going straight to my local and being transferred. So we get to the hospital. I've been on the phone to Chloe, like messaging her all the way up saying, what's the go? Are you able to do this? Are you able to do that for me? Because she was actually meant to be watching the kids for me while I was at that 10 a.m. appointment, because obviously Julia wasn't meant to be there, and those appointments can take forever, and I didn't expect the kids to sit there for that long because boring. So I organized for Chloe to take them to the park for me, which was amazing. So she organized with Jalil where the kids were going, what the kids were doing, what she was doing, and how she could help. Oh my God, she's a godsend, I'm just saying. You all should be jealous, she's amazing. We get to the hospital and I'm in quite a bit of pain. I didn't have to wait that long, I only waited a few minutes. And then they wheeled me into an examination room where they basically took my blood pressure and put an IV in just in case, and took some bloods. Oh, and they also did an internal check, which I consented to. I'm not a big lover of interventions, so but I did allow them to do an internal check because I wanted to know if I was actually dilating, because I wanted to know, is this real labor? So they did an internal check and I was already 3 centimeters dilated and fully effaced. So I was like, holy crap, it's happening. So then after they had done all of their tests that they wanted to do, they got me into the labor room, and I didn't really have much time to think about it, to be honest, because I really didn't think I was having a baby that day. So we get the camera out, and I'm so glad we did, because the footage that we got was pretty cool. There is a lot of footage, like there's a couple of hours worth. So obviously the video that I did was pretty tame. Like I just wanted to keep the best clips that were G-rated. I do have a personal video that I can keep for myself, which is like the whole thing, and that's pretty special for me because I've never had that with any of my other kids. Chloe took the reins with that one, and I'm so thankful that she did, because I was not thinking about it. Like every 20 minutes she was like, okay, we need to film something now. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm just doing that, aren't I? Because obviously mid-contraction, that's not what I'm thinking about. So the labor itself, I feel like the only way I actually got through it was the water from the shower. That actually really helped. So yeah, before the shower they broke my waters, and that was, they did suggest it. I hadn't actually thought about it. I didn't particularly want my waters broken. I was actually really anxious about it because I've had my waters broken with Jensen when I was in labor with him, and I was actually further along. I was about 8.5 centimeters. My water still hadn't broken, so they were trying to like get labor to progress. And they also don't like to use Pitocin or anything like that to speed up the labor once you've had a prior C-section, because it gives you a greater chance of rupture, because basically it's an artificial way of speeding up labor and your body's not technically ready for it yet. So they checked where my water was, and they checked me, and I was about 5 centimeters dilated. I basically begged not to have my waters broken. They did say, obviously they can't do anything that I don't consent to, but at the same time they can highly recommend that I get it done. They were just saying that I would have a way better chance of actually having a successful VBAC if I had my waters broken, simply because every time I had a contraction, baby's heart rate was dipping lower than what it should be. Baby's heart rate always like dip a tiny bit during contraction, but unfortunately his was dipping a little more than they expected, and my blood pressure was also quite low at this point. They highly suggested that I pop the waters to like move things along, so I did that, and it actually wasn't as bad as I had previously happened to me before, so that was good. And the contractions did intensify, but not half as bad as it did with Jensen, and I think that was because I was further along at that point. So I then jumped in the shower for some relief, which is great. And after I got out of the shower, I just felt more comfortable in the bed. And it's funny because when I watch labor and delivery videos on YouTube and things like that, I always, for some reason, I always say to myself, like, get off the bed, move around, it'll get things moving, blah 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 blah. I'm like, but I actually felt more comfortable in the bed, and I was like, oh, that kind of makes sense now. So I laid down on the bed and I felt better on my right side, and it kind of relieved the pressure off my stomach a little bit because I was still having really intense pain. At this point I decided the epidural was definitely going to be a possibility for me. It was just way more intense than my other labor, and I remember that one to be really intense. So I then felt so much relief for about an hour. It was so good. I was able to breathe, I was just like able to rest a little bit, and then the epidural stopped working. It wasn't even bearable at that point. It was just beyond a joke. It was all down where my incision was, and so I had a couple of doctors come in just to do like an assessment to make sure everything was fine. They basically said that everything was fine. I had no bleeding. The only thing that was actually slightly concerning was the pain. But the pains weren't as intense in between contractions. So that kind of signaled to them that it's not a rupture, that it's more just pulling pain. I then decided that I wanted them to fix this epidural. They ordered him to come down. They didn't make it to me in time. They basically said, he's not gonna get here in time and you're gonna have to stick this one out. So yeah, I was extremely scared. I didn't know whether or not I could do it because I'd been to this point before. With Jensen, I'd gotten to this point and it just didn't work out for me. So I was checked again and I was fully dilated. They told me that I would be ready to push soon. And so after this epidural had worn off and I was in that intense amount of pain, I knew within myself that I was in the transition mode. So that's usually when people start saying, I can't do this, I give up, I don't want to do it anymore. And I specifically remember saying, can't I just have the cesarean now? and I didn't mean it, and I'm so glad that everyone around me knew how much I didn't mean it. It's just that when you're in that much pain and there's no other way out for you, you kind of just look for an out. Obviously, another foolproof way of stopping the pain is birthing that baby. So I really liked laying on my side with my leg up in the air, which was my left leg up in the air, and apparently my husband kept telling me afterwards that I kept trying to roll off the bed when I was actually just trying to get him to hold my leg up, but I was in that much pain that I couldn't actually voice what I wanted. So at this point he is supporting me from the front end of me, and I've got Chloe filming on the other side, and I've got my midwives down there and doctors everywhere because it was a VBAC. So as I was pushing him, I was pushing on the most intense contractions, but unfortunately every time I pushed, the pain at the front of my stomach was actually like this burning pain, and it wasn't like on fire, but it felt like tearing, but it wasn't. So I was actually crying out, my stomach, my stomach, my tummy, my tummy. So they were monitoring me so closely at this point. They kept reminding me how it's probably just the anxiety, and it most likely was. Like, a lot of the pain probably was in my head because I was so worried about the rupture, because so many people before, like while I was pregnant, was saying, you know, there's so like a higher risk of rupture and blah 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 blah. So it's just like, it puts thoughts into your head of just negativity, and it makes you conjure up so many things in your mind. So I like, looking back on it now, I know that that's all it was, and I knew that I could do it. I knew that I could, and I knew that everyone around me believed that I could. So as I was pushing him out, as I was crowning and I reached down and touched his head, that gave me the motivation to keep going. I was like, oh my god, I am so close. Like, this is something I have wanted for years, ever since Jensen was born. And I was like, I can do this. And I knew that I could do it. And I looked at my husband, and he was giving me so many pep talks in my ear, and like, I'm tearing up now because every time I talk about him supporting me through this, I don't know why, I just get so emotional. You should have seen me try and edit the vlog. Like, every time I got to the birth bit and I saw him crying, I started crying. I was like, god damn it. And so like, take 5 minutes of editing time, hence why it was 8 days late. At this point, I knew it was a go. I knew he was coming out, and I knew everything was going to be fine, and I knew that the pain in my stomach wasn't so much there because it's not like he was there in my womb anymore. Like, my uterus is already starting to contract downwards, so it couldn't have been that. And I knew that as soon as I touched his head, I knew that in my heart I could do this. It took a couple of pushes to get his head out alone, but once his head was out, and a lot of people talk about like the burning ring of fire, that was not a thing for me, and I don't know why. Like, of course I felt like a tiny little burning sensation, but like, people, like, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people get this, but for me, I didn't see it. Like, I didn't feel it, nothing. I was like, oh my god, this is awesome. I was like, oh my god, I was expecting it to be worse. I remember being in the moment going, that didn't hurt. So then it was his shoulders, and he kind of just entered himself into the world, didn't he, buddy? And daddy reached down and caught baby and pulled him back up onto me, and that was it. It was amazing. I did it, didn't we? And it was worth it. It was so worth it. So that's basically the birth, but there is also more to a birth than just a baby. Placenta came out fine, detached itself. It was amazing. I was expecting it to be like worse than what it was, because I expected there to be like more contractions, but I don't know, it just kind of just came out. But I had a little bit of blood loss, not a whole lot, but about 300 mils. They were starting to get concerned about it because it wasn't kind of easing up, so they did give me the shot in the thigh, which can help with hemorrhaging, and also on the other side. But since I've had that, I now have looked into it, and I probably wouldn't get it again unless it was obviously an emergency, which that one wasn't. So recovery wise, I was then wheeled back to my room. I did stay the night. He was born at 5:44 p.m. and I had the best dinner ever. My husband ran out to Lord of the Fries, and if you haven't been there, it's in Perth. Oh my god, best vegan takeout. It is like the most unhealthy thing I've ever had in my life, but I so deserved that meal. We all did. So I'll go into a little bit about like my recovery, but I probably will do a separate video on it because it's actually been kind of not eventful, but I think it's something that if you are planning on having a VBAC, you would want to watch. The recovery is so different, and I wasn't really expecting it to be so different. So yeah, I'll go into depth in another video because this one is already going to be like 25 minutes long. Just quickly, I will go into a couple of tips that I have for you to hopefully get your successful VBAC. Number one is find people that will support you and your choices. You cannot do this on your own. You have to have a support group, whether that's your partner, a friend, anything, anyone that you are close to, that you trust, that will advocate for you when you are in too much pain to do so. Also, find a hospital that is going to support your choices, and don't stand for anything less. You do not have to go to your catchment hospital. As well, as far as I'm aware, here in Australia you do not. So you can go elsewhere. You just kind of need to kick up a stink about it, like I did. I also, it depends on the kind of pregnancies that you've had prior, but for me personally, I felt like less intervention throughout pregnancy gave me more power within myself. I felt more empowered because I felt like I was in control of this. I knew what I wanted and I was going to get it. I really do believe that you need to actually be educated on it. I knew that the risk of rupture wasn't as high as some doctors were telling me. I'd done my research. I had also spoken to many people when I was on Facebook groups of people that had actually done it, and getting their advice as well. But it also really depends on why you've had a prior caesareans. My prior caesareans were for reasons that were unlikely to happen again. So unless you have obviously medical history of things like preeclampsia and, you know, lots of other things that can actually cause birth problems, then I highly suggest that you give it a go. I will probably do another video on some tips, maybe in my recovery video. I don't know, I haven't really planned out this week. I just had a baby. I'm kind of just winging it. So if there's anything that you guys want to know or anything that you think would be helpful for you, let me know. Just put it in the comments or contact me on Instagram. Yeah, follow us on Instagram. I'm constantly updating my stories, even though I don't post daily onto my Instagram. I always update my stories. So if you want to follow this little dude, get on there, and also subscribe, and so you can see the rest of these videos. But yeah, we'll see you then. Bye guys.